Well, good afternoon. My name's John. I'm here for the next installment of My Life as I Remember It. Hope everybody's doing okay today. If you're enjoying this series, be sure and let me know. Leave a like, subscribe if you're not already, and leave a comment. Let me know how I'm doing. Now, when last we left off, I had finished the BEE, Basic Electricity and Electronics program in San Diego, and I was headed to Great Lakes Naval Training Center. Okay, which was commonly known as Great Mistakes, which really ought to tell you something. So let me start this story. Let me preface this story by telling you that. Now, I was coming from California, okay, which was not exactly super tight about haircuts and things like that. They were just, it's California. It's much more relaxed. So in between BEE and going to Great Lakes, I went home on leave for a little while. Kind of hung out with my friends, hung out with my mom a little bit. Not enough, which would always be my greatest regret is not spending more time with my mom, but story for another day. And then I loaded up my car and headed for Illinois. Specifically, Great Lakes Naval Training Center is actually, and was even at that time, the largest shore facility that the Navy had. And oddly enough, they decided to put it right smack dab as far from an ocean as you can get. It's actually about 20 miles north of Chicago in a little town called Waukegan, Illinois, right on the shore of the Great Lake. Okay, so I drive up there, and I'm driving up there, and of course got a ticket in Missouri because if you can't drive through Poplar Bluff, Missouri, without getting a ticket. Okay, and I remember this explicitly because while I was driving, the news had the story about a Russian nuclear reactor melting down. Yeah, that's right, ladies and gentlemen. That'll tell you how long ago this was because that was the Chernobyl accident. Okay, so this is spring of 1986. Okay, well, I get to Great Lakes. I find the base. I get checked in. And the guy that I check in with and give my orders to, the first thing out of his mouth isn't welcome aboard or how was your trip. It was, man, you got some balls checking into this command with that kind of haircut. And that kind of set the tone for what life was going to be like in Great Lakes. Now, I was going up there for what's called A school. Now, in the Navy, every job that you can do has its own education program, okay? And the primary, now, some people join, and they join undesignated. That means they're going to be whatever. Those people have a very basic seaman apprenticeship school to teach them the basics of shipboard stuff, things that they need to know. Firefighting, how the compartments on a ship are organized, things like that. Okay, but people who join under a contract to get a specific job, and those jobs were based on how good you scored on the ASVAB. For example, a gunner's mate might only need a 40 on his ASVAB to get into gunner's mate school, whereas my job, a fire control technician, you had to have, I think it was like an 85 or something. So, it's all based on that. But I was going up there for my A school. Now, fire control A school at the time was 26 weeks. It was a long program. And then I was also going to have my secondary training, which is more specialized. Okay, the fire control A school taught you everything you needed to know to give you a grounding in how to be a fire control technician. Now, in spite of what the name sounds like, fire control technician does not mean I put out fires. Okay, that wasn't it. Fire control refers to the systems that control and direct the fire of the ship's gun systems. Okay, so the school was more electronics, which is why I went through basic electricity and electronics school, so I could have a grounding in that theory. And but yeah, I got checked into the barracks, got checked onto the base, went and got a haircut. Figured out that my barracks was literally right across the street from the on-base McDonald's, which contributed to my slow but steady weight gain over the years. But I got there in springtime. Now it was going to be a couple of weeks before my class got started because they're waiting for everybody to get there. So I was doing general duties standing watches, cleaning stuff up, just that's standard busy work that the military has people do. Then we got started. Now, my class was an evening class. My A school class was evenings. We went in at 2 and got out at 10. Okay. We had 2 fleet returnees in my class. One was a first class who was cross-rating over to fire control. The other one was a guy who was a second class who was cross-rating over to fire control, which means they had left other jobs where that job may have been overmanned, or maybe they were couldn't get promoted because there was too many people. And since my job, fire control tech, was undermanned, they were able to cross-rate into it. Okay, so they quit their old job, but those were the class leaders. The class leader and the assistant class leader. So we had 2 fleet returnees, which the rest of us were, had never been anywhere near a ship, so what did we know? But we started the classes, and it was a hard program because a lot of stuff was like, what? And we started off with the very beginning. We started off with electron flow. And that's when I learned that even at that time, we still didn't really 100% know how electricity works. We don't really know. We just know it is a thing, and we know how to use it and how to generate it and how to conduct it, but we don't really understand the process too well, at least not back then. Okay, and we went into analog electronics, things with synchros and servos, and then we went into digital electronics, things like that are the foundation of modern day computing. But a lot of people don't even realize that before digital computing, what you might think of as your desktop PC, that's a digital computer. There were analog computers going all the way back to pre-World War II, and so you can do the same job in different ways. That's the important part of it. And we had to learn both systems. We had to learn the analog system, which uses a series of electrical inputs based on, say, bearing and elevation. Okay, and those you have synchros and servos that, because of the position and the elevation, would send a certain quantity of electrical signal, and those would turn other things, and it was all geared in a way so that if this is this and that is that, then your output will be this. And it was all done with analog components, synchros, servos, vacuum tubes, physical things. And then the digital side of it is, microcircuitry. And they have different types of microcircuits. You've got ANDs and NANDs and NORs or ORs, and you want to hear about that, you let me know, but I don't want to go into it all. And then we worked on the basics of radar, what it was, how did it work. We had to learn all that stuff. And it was a rough class. I mean, we started out with, 16, 17 people, and I think we graduated with like 12, because a lot of people would drop out. And maybe they'd get held back and they'd graduate with another class. Sometimes if they dropped out, if they failed hard enough, they'd actually get, reassigned to a different job. So yeah, this was going on for 6 months. Now, while I'm doing that, I got a car. And as I mentioned in the last video, having a car has a lot of advantages when you're 19 years old and on a military base, because not everybody has one. Now, the thing about Great Lakes is that it was a huge school command, so there's a ton, literally a ton of people there. Now, if I remember correctly, the ratio of male to females on that base at the time was almost 400 men for every woman on that base. So you can imagine that the ladies pretty much had their pick of the litter. Okay. Right across the street from my barracks was the McDonald's, and right across the parking lot from the McDonald's was the Enlisted Men's Club. So, the club was pretty much where I spent all of my time. Of course, I also had a car, so me and some of the guys that I hung out with, we could go out to the mall, we could go, whatever. We'd go down to the lake shore and drink on the shore of the lake, and, plus, real important fact, Waukegan, where Great Lakes Naval Training Center is, was about 30 minutes from the Wisconsin state line. Now, that's relevant because at the time, 1986, the drinking age in Chicago had already been raised to 21. But the drinking age in Wisconsin was still 19. And literally 3 feet across the state line, there was a bar. It was called the Bullpen. So whenever we could, we all piled into my car and went up the 30 miles or so to cross the state line to go to the bullpen. And spent a lot of time and a lot of money in that place. Okay. But let's see, had a couple, more or less steady girlfriends. One girl I dated for a little while. She's a little cute little redheaded girl named Wendy McMullen. She was nice, but that didn't end up working out because she had an extremely strong attachment to her virginity, and that was a bit of a problem for me. But and then so we get through. So I'm doing the standard military stuff: partying, drinking, chasing tail, everything I can do, and going out to the mall and seeing movies. Saw a crap ton of movies. It was during my A school that Top Gun came out, and oddly enough, after that movie, it was actually pretty cool to be a Navy person. Okay, which wasn't always the case. All right, but after Top Gun, everybody started to want to go out in uniform. So, that was a big help. Just leave it at that. All right. So I actually graduated from FCA school with my original class. So that was great because not everybody did. All right. And then I was scheduled for my specialized training. Okay. Now, in terms of what C schools you got, there was really kind of, I don't remember if it was completely random in terms of what C school you got, or if it was based on your grade point average through the course. I'm not even sure. But I will say this, through A school, I was, just like in high school, a solid C student. I never failed anything, but I didn't really excel either. Okay? And that's been one of the great failings in my life. I've always just sort of half-assed my way through everything. And that would be a trend that would continue in my life all the way up until my mom passed away and I had to freaking get serious about growing up, So I half-assed my way through A school, so I didn't have the grade point average. Now, I was guaranteed AC school, but like I said, I believe it was based on your GPA, and mine wasn't the greatest, so I didn't get the first pick. Some of my classmates got they got sent to CWIS school or Spy 1 school or whatever, and I got assigned to the the Mark 68 gunfire control system, which was an old system even at that time. It was basically, in 1986, it was only on maybe 3 classes of ships, Knox-class frigates, Adams-class destroyers, and one other class of destroyer. But it wasn't widespread in the fleet. Okay? Now, I had like 3 months in between A school and C school. So I got assigned to the facilities department, which basically means, the idle hands that we have to put to work. And the job I got given, was in the building where my school was, the A school and the C school. There were other schools in there as well. One of them was the people who worked on periscopes, the optical men. Okay, and there was a couple other things in there as well. But the facilities actually had a deal going on where they sold donuts in the morning for the people that were on morning classes. And I got assigned to sell the donuts. So, yeah, that was, technically speaking, my first job in the military was selling donuts. And between that and McDonald's, well, how that story ends. But anyway, so I did that for like 3 months and continued carousing around the club. The base club in Great Lakes was actually really nice. It was big. And this is just the enlisted men's club. There was an officers club and a chiefs club, I think. Or actually, no, there was a chiefs room in the enlisted men's club. But there was a big game room, lots of pool tables, lots of video games. There was like a big bar in there, and then there was like a secluded little bar. And there was also one room there where they had dancing. So, and at least a couple of times a week, it was like, and every night there would be a different thing. It'd be rock one night and country one night and R&B one night, and But I spent a lot of time in there, whole lot of time. Okay, pumped a lot of quarters into a lot of video games, and that's actually where I started spending a lot of time in front of the Trivial Pursuit video game. I pumped a ton of quarters into that, but I got really good. I was kind of like famous for that. That was like my first little brush with having a reputation as something other than a loser, because it was all like, nah, man, don't play against him. He knows these questions. But and just to let you know, give you a time frame on that. The big songs on the radio at that time were, let's see, Fight for Your Right to Party by the Beastie Boys, and Land of Confusion by Genesis, and Jody Watley Wanting a Brand New Lover. So that's around that time frame. All right. Then C School started. Okay. Now, when I graduated A School, that's when I got promoted to E4, because graduation from that school automatically promoted you to E4, or Petty Officer Third Class. Okay, which actually, since the titles in the Navy are based on what your job is. Okay, like, so that would be a Fire Controlman Third Class, or an FC3. Every job of the Navy has an acronym, a 2-letter acronym for it. Like a fire control tech is an FC, a gunner's mate is a GM, an electronics tech is an ET. Okay, so I graduated from A School, got my FC3, my Stripe, my Crow. It's called a Crow because the eagle is on it, and you get one chevron. Okay, that's a third class petty officer. Now, it was a bump in pay, so that was good. I mean, the money still was garbage back then, but it was a bump in pay, so that was good. And so I'm a third class petty officer, and when that happened, I got moved over to the petty officers barracks, because we were in a barracks for A School, and they were 2-man rooms. And the barracks were basically almost directly on the shoreline, which made it a lot of fun in the summertime, because they did not have air conditioning, and it was really humid up there. Okay, and then when it got cold, which it did in Great Lakes, very cold. Okay, like stupid cold. I remember when I was up there, the first time it snowed that year was on October 1st, and it snowed like a foot in 30 minutes. It was crazy. And the locals are just like driving around doing their thing like it's nothing. And all of us Southern boys were like, what the actual shit is this? But the barracks were heated, but they didn't have AC, so it was actually nicer to be there in the wintertime when the barracks were heated versus the summertime when they did not have air conditioning. Now, eventually I got moved over into the petty officer barracks, which were across from the chow hall. And that entire year because I was up there, I ended up being up there for an entire year between A School, which was 6 months, and then 3 months waiting for my C School class, and then a 3-month C School. I ended up being there for an entire year. And in that year, I never once ate at the galley on base. I lived on McDonald's, or microwaved this or microwaved that, or whatever. But I never actually ate at the cafeteria. But the petty officer barracks were across the street from the cafeteria. It was a central living room with 4 bedrooms off of it, and each room had up to 3 people assigned to it. And my roommates pretty much hated me, okay, because neither one of them was particularly successful when it came to the ladies, and I was always bringing somebody back from the club to my dorm room to do our thing, and they'd come home from wherever they were, and there'd be a sock on the door, so they were like sitting out there going, waiting on me to get finished doing mine. So my roommates did not like me. And I'll be honest, that was a really crappy thing for me to do. And at the time I didn't feel bad about it because, hello, getting laid. But afterwards, when I started growing up a little bit, I kind of felt bad about that. It was, and actually, funny thing, the barracks that we were in for A School, I mentioned they were 2-man barracks. My roommate at that time actually managed to get himself a case of the crotch critters, and didn't do anything about it, and I ended up with him. Through no fault of my own, I had a case of the crabs at 20 years old, and I felt really kind of ticked off about that, because if I'm going to come down with something stupid like that, I'd like to have earned it. So him and I had words. We had crosswords for a minute. Okay. Let's see. So C school did the donut thing for 3 months, and I'm still doing the man whore thing. And my nickname among my friends at that point was the Great White Shark, because basically all I did was swim. You remember that line in Jaws? The only thing a shark does is swim and eat, and make baby sharks. Well, my reputation was the only thing he does is go to the club, drink, and try to make baby sharks. Okay, because that was my biggest motivation at that time, because, like I mentioned in high school, I was not popular. I did not have a lot of luck with the ladies. So once I found my environment, I did everything I could to make the best of it. And I was actually kind of lucky in that regard, because I had zero idea of how to talk to women. But when I was in San Diego, I made friends with this girl who liked other girls, and she ended up teaching me how to talk to ladies, and what to say and what not to say, and what approach works and what approach doesn't, and more importantly, what to do if you get your chance to leave a favorable impression. So to this day, I thank her. Now, valuable skills. Very, very valuable. All right, so then C school's going on. Now, while I'm in C school, there was this girl there. She was in ETA school. Her name was Deanne. And I had been trying to get with her for months and months and months and months, but she was dating some guy named Steve and would never give me the time of day. And then all of a sudden one night because we saw each other at the club all the time, and, sat and drank and, shot the shit, whatever. But then suddenly she started wanting to go out with me. And I had really been chasing her hard, because you got to remember, I was 20 years old, okay? I was easily beguiled. And she had ample assets. Okay, and when you're 20 years old, that's a powerful draw. I mean, it really, really is. And then suddenly she wanted to start going out with me. And I was like, well, okay. And not long after that, right around the time I was getting ready to graduate from C school, and actually, I don't know if I ever told her or not, but while I was waiting for her to come around, I did hook up with her best friend a couple of times, completely by accident, but it was fun, so thanks, Shirley. All right. Yeah, needless to say, that car saw a lot of action that year in Great Lakes. It was a Chevy Blazer, so there was lots of room. Anyway, and then, right when I'm getting ready to graduate, she comes to see me and tells me that she's pregnant. And me being a good Southern boy, I say, well, then we should get married. So I took all of my, when I was getting ready to graduate, I got orders to a ship in Japan. It was called the USS Lockwood. Now, when you're moving overseas, they give you a bundle of money to make the move in case you need to transport any of your possessions or whatnot. And I took all that money and I spent all of it on wedding rings. And we got married at the Justice of the Peace in Waukegan, Illinois. And I didn't question anything. Now, that story's going to take a fairly bad turn in the next episode. And if you know me, you know exactly what I'm talking about. If you don't know, well, I'm going to go into it, but that'll be in the next episode. So I get married and get ready. I get my orders. I'm going to Japan, and it was too late to do anything about it. She was going to be going to Virginia. I was going to be going to Japan. There wasn't nothing we could do about it, but just whatever. But we got married. Never actually lived together because we were both living on base. And I was in the middle of getting ready to transfer, and she was going to be transferring maybe a month later. So there was no point in trying to get an apartment or anything. Now I go home on leave and see my mom, see my friends, blah, 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 hang out, go back to the karate school, visit everybody, and get ready to head overseas. Okay, because the ship, the Lockwood, was home ported in Yokosuka, Japan, which I don't know if any of you have ever been to Japan, but it is far. Very, very far. Okay, so what I did was I actually caught what used to be called US-15. And it was a 747 that started on the East Coast, went from, like, I think it was Virginia to Missouri to LA to Anchorage, Alaska to refuel, and then to Tokyo, and I think it ended up in the Philippines. And then it would reverse it, change course, and come back. But I got booked on that. I got booked on the military flight. I had to, I think I met it in Missouri. Yeah, I think I met it in Missouri. So I flew to Missouri, and I flew to Missouri on my own, and then I got on USA 15, flew to Los Angeles, and then to Anchorage, Alaska, and then to Tokyo. And it was about a 15, maybe 14-hour flight. It was long. And of course, it was a 747, so it's fairly comfortable, but it's still a long time in an airplane. But that was my year in Great Lakes. I mean, I went through 2 schools, spent 3 months selling donuts, spent a lot of time man-whoring around, sometimes successfully, sometimes not. All right. I made a couple of good friends, but not a ton. But it was a good time, because summertime up there is really gorgeous. I mean, it's cold as a witch's tit in wintertime, but in summertime, it's beautiful up there because there's a beautiful lake, and Wisconsin is gorgeous. I mean, wintertime, not so much because you're going to be up to your sack in snow for about 5 months, but, it was interesting. The people up there are weird. That was the first time I ever got arrested, actually, was at the bullpen. Some guy was having an argument with this girl, and he smacked her, and nobody even blinked. So apparently that was relatively common up there. All right, but me being a Southern boy, I wasn't going to stand for that. So I explained that he needed to stop doing that, and then when he took a poke at me, I dropped him. And then of course the cops showed up. Now, being in the Navy, as soon as they saw my ID, they just took me back to base and let me go. Which was bad, because then I had to let a friend of mine go back up there and get my car. But I didn't get in trouble or anything, but it was like, what the hell? They're just different culture, different values. The food was okay. In Wisconsin, it's like Oktoberfest all year round. Everything is beer and brats all the time, when it's not glacial winter. But, it was a good year. I mean, I could have... of course, looking back on it, I really wish that I'd spent more time on my studies as opposed to partying. But, that's one of those things you can always, I think most people can say that. I wish I'd have paid more attention to my grades. But then again, I don't want to die and say, I wish I'd have partied more. Anyway, that about wraps it up for today. Next episode will be me getting to Japan and getting to my ship. Thanks so much if you're still listening to this. Like I said, if you're not already subscribed, please subscribe. Give me a like and a comment. Let me know how I'm doing. Let me know what you think. Thanks so much, folks.